and we'll be on our way. All right. Hey, Thomas.
Hey,
Welcome to our first
Aramis?
rebrand, relaunch, something or another of our Scope Creepers podcast. This will be episode 0. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's a good day to be here. Good day to be podcasting. A good day to be talking about game dev.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oops. It is a great day for all of that above. We decided that our first theme here is going to be around deciding to become a full-time indie developer. I recently became a full-time indie developer again, and you have been doing it for how many months now? What are we at?
Let's see. I quit in June or July of 2023, but then I was on a trip for like a month. So I I feel like I hit the ground running in August. So that's kind of what
Your
what I've
first day
been
would be kind
counting.
of your August situation where that nice
Yeah.
break, which is probably a pretty helpful break in between those two, like having a full-time job and being a full-time indie. Like
Yeah. It
having just
was
gone through it,
crazy.
it's rough, right?
Yeah, like I left my job and then I realized that I was going to Europe for over 3 weeks because my friend was getting married and I was in the wedding. So we went over to Spain and just realizing that I was going to be on this vacation for 3 weeks and then coming back and not coming back to a job and just like working on the projects that I want to work on, it was a surreal time for sure.
That is weird. Like having a looming, because you probably weren't doing any game dev while you were on that trip.
No, I was doing some filming. I did like I if you've seen my video about like how I quit my job to
Mm-hmm.
pursue my dream, I did like I took a lot of footage there in some of the different places that we went. But other than that, I was just, taking it easy and enjoying the trip.
Nice, really nice. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. That's a useful break in between the two kind of minds. So August, what is that? 7 months from now? August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. Yeah, you're in your 8th month
Yep.
now. That's awesome.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
awesome.
It's been pretty crazy. I did a 6 month retrospective video recently, and I talked about like all of the feelings and the accomplishments and stats that I've worked through so far. And it was sometimes I get a little discouraged because I'm like, oh, I'm like, now I'm like 8 months into this thing and I still can't pay my bills. But then
Mm-hmm.
I'm making that video was nice because I'm like, oh, I've actually like checked off a lot of milestones and I've gotten a lot of work done. So yeah.
Absolutely. From someone who's been watching you from the sidelines, it was so cool to see a noticeable uptick in your productivity and your ability to output videos, and like seeing you launch your game and port it to all the different platforms you ported it to and start Bridges and Docks and get that going. And like it was cool to see a very clear inflection point in your output as a developer, which makes sense because then you're full-time dedicated to doing it. You get to do a lot more
Yeah,
and have more brain space to dedicate to it. It's cool to
absolutely.
see you zoom out for 6 months and then recognize your own progress.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's fun that now we get to do it together because we've talked about this before where we've been like ships passing in the night where you
Yeah,
were full-time indie developer for a while and I was at my day job and then I quit and you got another job and so now we're like doing it at the same time, which is fun.
finally on the same page, which is hopefully where this podcast can be something we check in however often we want to have a conversation. I would like to do it on some sort of regular cadence just to, you know, I enjoy talking with you. We've been doing this offline for a long time, and just kind of putting this into something that hopefully could share and inspire other people as well would be kind of my thesis for the podcast. Does that align with what you're thinking of for kind of the
Yeah,
reason we're sharing
definitely.
this as a podcast?
Yeah, and I mean, I've been encouraged by our chats just because I feel like we're so closely aligned on what we want to do, and it's it's interesting because I don't know any other game developers in person. Like all of my game developer relationships are online.
Yeah.
So being able to have chats like this where somebody knows what it's like to try and balance developing a game, going through all of the design iterations, and then like making a YouTube video about it, and like down to like what makes a good thumbnail. It's such a niche place to be. And so having somebody else to talk through a lot of these things is tremendously helpful.
And we're like relatively the same size YouTube channels. So we're like
Yeah.
at the same point of like, we've had a few pop off videos that have done well, and we've had plenty that haven't done well. And
Yeah.
I found it very useful to empathize with that, because I can talk to my partner as much as I want and she'll listen to me and ask some good questions, but there's just, she can't empathize with what it's like to be a game developer or make a YouTube video. And so it's been a unique relationship in my life that I've definitely appreciated over the years now, which is wild that it's been
Yeah.
years.
I know. That's crazy. Like, yeah. It's yeah. Man, YouTube is a funny beast because I was just thinking like the video that I posted that has by far gotten the least amount of views on my entire channel is the only video that somebody paid me to sponsor. And so it's like kind of embarrassing. But you know, that's just you just don't know what's gonna do well and what's gonna flop. At least I
No.
don't.
I definitely don't, and it's very clear. But that's not, I mean, that's also not why we're making content. Like, we want to grow and get bigger. That's obviously part of it, but it's also, it seems like some of our best videos are ones that are just a little bit more raw and us.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So I asked you to come up with a few questions for this theme of deciding to be full-time indie dev, especially having just done it myself. It's fresh off my perspective of like making the decision and coming up with the reasoning and the risk analysis and all those different things. So I'm interested to see how some of our thoughts and answers differ now that you have a little bit more hindsight in the decision and you're, you know, quite a bit further along the journey than I am at this point. My first question would be, as you were thinking back to this and you're making, you know, the consideration of becoming a full-time indie dev and quitting your job, how did you think through the risks and rewards, and kind of what were those risks for you, and what do you see as the reward and kind of the benefit? How did you approach that process?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. Because I was just thinking the other day, like I'm kind of playing for keeps now. You know, it's like there's like real stakes on the line where it's like, you know, I'm giving up a good paycheck and kind of betting on myself. Like a lot of indie developers, okay, I don't know about a lot, but the ones that you hear about are the ones that uh, spend some time making a game, release it, it does pretty well, and they have enough financial stability to leave their job and then continue making games full time. And
Yeah.
that's not what I'm doing. I am uh, front. I'm borrowing time so that I can invest that to make games that I think will make me financially stable.
Mm-hmm.
So I pooled up some money, paid down some of my debts, and I am living with a humble means, trying to keep my expenses low, and all the while putting in the hours to um, develop some games that are fairly small scoped and release them to get some recurring revenue coming in so that hopefully it'll be something that I can continue to do in the long run. So risk and reward is like a real big thing for me. Um, like when I was contemplating quitting my job, well, when I did quit my job, I was thinking about my wife and I both have a lot of student loans, and we bought a house. At the time, it was like a year and a half prior to me quitting my job. I think we bought a house. We had a mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
We had student loans, and my wife was pregnant at the time. Now we have like a 4-month old, and so these are like real responsibilities where I'm like, okay, I'm a dad,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm quitting my stable job to make video games. I need to check to make sure that this is like actually something that isn't going to like train wreck my family situation, you know.
Yeah.
So it sounds stupid when you say it like that, but I took a lot of time to get a hold of our finances, make sure I knew where every penny was going.
Yeah.
Kind of map out some things that like I even went so far as to like study different people's Patreon accounts and like figure out like the average ratio for subscriber count to like Patreon support, so that I was like, okay, if I hit this milestone on YouTube, I can expect to make this much amount on Patreon,
Oh,
stuff
cool.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and basically so there was a lot of risk assessment. I remember sitting down with my wife and saying like, hey, I've done like a cursory glance at our finances, and I think that we can make this work. I really feel like, and I gave her a lot of explanations, like I feel like I have the skill to make video games by myself. I feel like I would thrive with that creative freedom. Um, I feel like not everybody could make it work, but I feel like I can make it work, like all this stuff. And she has been pretty supportive. Uh, and but that conversation happened far uh, prior to me actually quitting my job, because there was a lot of more stuff that we had to go through. So there was a lot of
Hmm.
risk assessment, and I think that everybody should anybody who's contemplating doing this full time really needs to count the cost, because in general the games industry is a hit driven industry, and that's really hard to rely on if you're trying to make like a steady income.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the reward. I mean, there's a lot for me. I don't. I'm not pursuing uh, amassing a lot of wealth through developing video games. I just want to make enough for it to make sense for me to keep doing it.
Hmm.
But the other things that I gain are um, freedom for my time. I've had I've had geographical freedom for a while before quitting my job. I worked at uh, two different places that I worked remotely for, so I could
Hmm.
take my work wherever I went, which was awesome.
Super nice.
But I still had to clock in, the 8 to 5 every day, and I was realizing that uh, I think that I could manage my own time better than uh, my bosses could. So I really wanted to be able to like, you know, if I want to go take a 2 hour lunch and catch up with an old friend, and then work from like 10 to midnight later that night, like that's something that I think that I would be better suited to do. So that was a big one. But I mean, the biggest thing is like I just didn't see a path forward in my life career-wise where I wasn't making my own video games. And so I knew that that was like where I wanted to go long term no matter what. And so I just figured if I start earlier, then I will be able to compound that work, and it'll just
Yeah.
grow on itself.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know if that answers your questions, but that's kind of how I assessed a lot of the risk and reward for that.
Yeah. It absolutely answers my question, and it is 100% something that if you're considering doing, it's knowing what those are. What are those risks? Why are you doing it? Right? Writing those things down. And I mean, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago when we were chatting about me quitting my job. Like, you know, why do I want to do it? Where do you invest your time, and why do you do it? And like knowing those reasons can really help then weigh that to the risks. For me, something I'm really excited about as far as reward is I'm gonna become like the best version of myself for however long I'm doing this. I have already felt that this week where I'm taking care of myself in a much different way. I'm more present in my life. I like getting even only a couple weeks into it. Like the stress of the job has just kind of shed itself off of me, and I felt that when I stumbled into this the first time back in 2022. I worked out a bunch. I ate healthy foods. I got a good night of sleep. I woke up early. I like all these things kind of crystallized around it because I knew if I could keep me going, I'd be more successful in what I'm doing. Um, and I think for me, that's one of the biggest things that was the reward is I can go be the best version of myself. So then in my life with my partner, with my friends, with my family, I show up as the best me, not a burnt down me from work. Is that
Yeah,
something you felt in this last couple months here of like doing it? Have you felt more present in your life?
definitely. I feel like there was a bigger shift when I went from the job I had 2 jobs ago to my more previous job, because that
Sure.
was when I left the corporate software world and went into the games industry. So I worked
Mm-hmm.
as a gameplay programmer for a few years, and that shift was bigger for me because it was much less soul sucking. Like I was learning a ton, and I was working on something that was creative, and I felt like I was contributing to the product instead of being like this small cog that even if I didn't do anything, like nobody would probably notice, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that was a really big shift. But then I also noticed that began to stale after a few years, and I realized that I wasn't growing and I wasn't getting as much being able to contribute to the projects that I was working on to the amount that I wanted to. I was kind of pigeonholed into programming, and I wanted to do like
Sure.
more design and more creative work. Um, so that, but but yes, well, yeah, something that I didn't foresee happening was I thought, and I'm interested to hear if this happened for you too. I thought that when I quit my job, it would be like exciting, and then I would go out my front door, look around, and just take in this deep breath and be like, yes, okay, cool, let's go, you know, and kind of have like feeling that weight off of my shoulders. But instead it's been more like, okay, the clock is ticking. Like this is day zero, and you have X amount of days to like figure this out, you know. So I've actually found that I work longer hours more frequently than I did when I had a day job, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
enjoying a lot of it. But I do feel like it's uh, less of a freedom, like just mentally, and it's more of like a fire, and it's like, okay, you gotta make it work. I don't know if you feel similarly, but that's kind of how I feel. Maybe it's because when I quit my job, my wife was pregnant, and that was like a very clear uh like
there's a timer on
deadline where I
that.
was like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So
That is one of my questions is about worries and stuff like that. So we can chat about that a little bit here. Um,
mhm.
I initially, after they turned off my access on my computer, and I met with the HR person at 4:30, and at 4:45 I was out of the system. I went for a walk afterwards, and it was just the most surreal thing because I've felt this before, right? I've been free before. Free's not a great way of saying it. Like I wasn't a slave before, but
Yeah.
having the freedom of not having a job again, I was just so baffled by the fact that I was back, and I was like, huh. And so much for me was like, can I do it this time? Can I keep it going this time? And so there's a lot of like, ah, shit, can I do it? I don't know. That's a lot of it. Now, I also have the idea that there's a timer. And being sick last week was like, oh my God, if I don't actually start doing game dev till Monday, that's a week. I'm already mid March.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're an idiot. What are you doing? Like, you're wasting your time being sick here. Go fucking do something.
Yeah.
And I was like, no. Take your break. Like, I think some of it was burnout from my job and like feeling really down. So then letting that kind of happen last week and just kind of getting something out the door, feeling a little productive, and then hitting the ground running on Monday really, really, really felt good. And I feel that fire too. I feel the constant drive of like, I need to go be doing things. I should be editing a clip from Twitch into a short. I should be planning out my next YouTube video. I should be doing more game dev. I should be dedicating time to figuring out what I want to do on stream next. I should be like, I also need to then figure out that balance of no. We also need to rest. We need to relax. We need to go hang out with friends. And luckily, I do have some friends who I frequently play video games with. We do a Dungeons and Dragons every Thursday night, doing some role playing. So it's some dedicated time for me to go step away where I have to go be present and do other things, which I think is going to be really, really healthy in the long run. Because I also understand that drive, the fire, the clock's ticking. You only have so long before realistically you should get another job again. And
Yep.
I feel that. I'm trying not to pay attention to it because I've done the math as well. I know when tentatively my funding for myself runs out, and I'm trying not to focus too much on that and instead focus on just like, what am I working on now and being present in that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super relatable. I just 2 weeks ago, I talking about sick days, I barbecued some hamburgers for me and my wife for dinner, and
Nice.
I severely undercooked them, and
Oops.
I gave myself food poisoning.
Oh no.
And it was so stupid. It was dark out, and I just didn't even like put a light on the grill, and I'm like, yeah, that's probably fine. Um, so anyway, I got real sick. Like I was like, yeah, just like throwing up a lot, and it put me out of commission for 2 or 3 days. And I was thinking, if I had a day job, sick days are sick days. It's like,
No,
okay,
no big
yeah,
deal.
you just let your body heal. And now I'm like, oh man, this has ramifications for me now, and it's just an interesting uh, mindset shift for sure. But yeah, so I have a question for you
Sure.
about specifically. Uh, I'm interested about that decision point when you wanted to quit your job. Like, was it something that happened gradually for you, or was it? Because I know the first time around, it was kind of like something that happened to you instead of like necessarily like this time it was more of an intentional decision. Um, actually, I don't know if I agree with that. There's like nuance there for sure, um, but like this time when you left your job, I want to know, was it something that happened to you instantaneously, or was it kind of like a slow burn, or like what was that? Can you point to a time where you were like, okay, I'm going to quit my job and do indie development, and what did that look like?
It was not an instant moment. For me, really big life choices come down to a series of dominoes that get bigger and bigger and bigger and eventually topple over. And the big domino of like, I'm going to quit my job now and go make games is the final domino that falls, right? For me, it's a series of small dominoes that progressively get bigger, and it can make a big decision like that seem like the inevitable next step. And so, no, it wasn't an instant moment, but it was over the course of, I had that job for 15 or 16 months. Over the course of that time, the job weighed heavily on me. I was a lead on a support team, which means I was working with the most difficult customers who implemented our software. I got to do some engineering stuff. I got to work with really great people. I like the people on my team. I like the company I work for. They respected me. If I needed help, I'd raise my hand, and all the way up to the CEO would come and help, and they would jump on and help with different things. That's really cool and really unique. But genuinely, generally, it just felt draining, and it felt like something that was, my cup was slowly staying emptier and emptier and emptier. I would have moments of being able to recharge and refill the cup, but it was dwindling. It was lowering, and that's burnout, right? It was becoming burnt out. And I told that to the company. I said, "Hey, I'm looking for some sort of change." They were working on getting me into a different position, and I was talking with different people in the leadership and trying to figure that all out. And before they came up with a proposal, I wanted to make a decision that said, "Hey, am I gonna like regret this? If they find me a job in 6 months or 3 months, what if I still don't want to have a job? What if I still want to go make games? Right? I don't want to screw these people over that they got me a new job and I still quit in 6 months." So it's a building passion inside of me of like, I was saving money ruthlessly during those 16 months so I could do this again. That was my goal, right? I stumbled into it. I quit a really shitty company in 2022 that was toxic, was going to do a little bit of a sabbatical, and then just said, "Hey, what the heck? Let me try to make a game." In, I think I had 8 months to do it. And I ended up doing that, but then I had to get a job again. And then getting a job again, I'm like, perfect. I'm going to save up money so I can go do it again for real this time. That was supposed to be next year sometime. That was going to be my goal, was going to be next year. And quite frankly, seeing Pirate Software explode in popularity in December and having his success through shorts and Twitch streaming really, really, really gave me pause. Mostly because it showed that it could be done. Thor is an incredible creator. He has an incredible presence on Twitch. He's a really cool person to hang out and watch stream. And I remember talking to you and sharing stuff about that in our Discord, chatting back and forth, like, dude, there's something here. And that's the type of content I want to make. And feeling that and seeing it be successful, seeing him go to the Streamer Awards and winning the Software and Game Developer Streamer of the Year, like all that shit, I'm like, God, it gave me pause, and it definitely pushed me along to make this decision sooner. And I'm incredibly thankful for that happening, because I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to be doing it and hitting the ground running. So there's no single decision. It just kind of happened. And then in the beginning of the year, I reflected upon 2023, and I was like, shit, I didn't like that year. That was not a fun year of my life. I wasn't the best version of me. I did some stuff that I thought were cool milestones, like fully releasing Chess Survivors and continuing to work on it. But I knew I wanted to make some changes this year. And so then bunkering down and seeing what the budget looked like, the numbers worked out, and I'm at least here until summer of next year, which is awesome.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so follow-up question to that. I'm very curious to hear, because you've been talking about streaming and Thor's streaming career, and I'm interested to hear what do you have like a solid idea of what your business plan is? Like, because it's something that's super interesting to me for obvious reasons. I'm very invested in trying to figure out how indie developers can continue to support themselves full time. And I like to compare and contrast what that looks like for different people. And so, like, between you and me, we have kind of different implementations for what we're pursuing. And one of the big ones is that you stream consistently. And so I just want to hear, like, what does success look like to you? And like, what in your mind, what are those stepping stones to like get there?
My business plan. My general goal with my business plan is trying to create opportunities for luck to happen, and investing my time in situations that I think can help that luck occur, and keeping my eyes open for when it happens. I think for me, why streaming? I think I'm a genuinely enjoyable person to hang out with, and I can foster a community of people who will genuinely want to help me. And through that, they will help me make a really cool game. They will help me think through challenging decisions. They will help me, meet new people. They might refer me to other streamers. They might share my content. I think creating a group of people who genuinely enjoy my presence, and not in a weird parasocial way, but just in a, hey, this guy's cool, we should try to share his content around, is something that I think is valuable for me from Twitch. Personally speaking, I don't come from a game development background. I suck at structuring my game development code. I suck at art. I'm pretty bad at a lot of those different aspects. And I think being able to get really, really quick feedback on if something's good or bad is very helpful for me. I was talking to somebody in Discord about Fibonacci's Final Sequence, a game that's now basically dead, about that game. And it was really clunky to go back and forth with that feedback. And I like a tighter feedback loop, a tighter iteration loop. I have an idea of a direction of the game I want to build, but how do I get there is going to be something I figure out along the path. And I think that's something that hopefully can resonate with people through YouTube and Twitch. Oh, hey, it's not this shiny devlog that gets, shot out at the end. It's, oh, this is months of work, of moments of just despair of having no idea why it's not working the way you want it to. And I think there's something compelling in sharing that. And I enjoyed that. And that's ultimately, I think, why I'm going to be doing Twitch. YouTube specifically, I like editing videos. I like telling a story like that. I think it can give me a little bit bigger reach than Twitch, and I'm hoping to make that help. I'm hoping to point people toward Twitch through YouTube. So that would be where YouTube fits in my head, is a platform for me to gain more reach to hopefully bring people over into the stream. And so success in, quite frankly, in streaming would be when I go live, becoming one of the top couple channels in the software and game development category, and just continually growing that as much as possible, as quick as possible. And then hopefully through that, creating a really kick-ass game that people will play test and help me make really, really good, help me refine, and then be my minions and spread it out into the world. Something like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree that I think you definitely have a good personality for streaming and video creation. But I think it's interesting because both you and I make YouTube videos and games for Steam. But then it seems like for you, you take a step towards like public facing, maybe like marketing, where you are like investing into streaming, and I'm taking a step back into going into my dark corner and trying to port the game to like as many consoles as I can, so that it's like a little more technical and like less public facing to try and get more products out there. But you're like doing like more marketing to get like a better product and also more marketing for that product. So yeah, it's a very interesting.
Part of me hopes it can become supplementary income as well. That it could be, it could remove stress from the game having to be successful. If the game only has to fulfill 50% of my revenue or 50% of my operating costs, me living, me feeding my cats, like if the game, if the bar of that amount, if the bar of that what it has to fulfill lowers, it takes stress off that, and I can focus on just making a game that's enjoyable and fun to play, right?
Yeah.
So
definitely.
I think there's part of me that hopes that it becomes some sort of a stable revenue that starts chewing away. Now, the other flip of the coin is like creating a tutorial content online. A lot of people create those, create tutorials, create paid for tutorial, systems on Udemy or their own game dev course or something like that. I don't like that personally, and not that I don't like it. I think there's a place, and certain people make really good content like that. Like I took a GD Quest course at one point about making games, and that really helped me learn Godot quicker. I personally don't want to make those as a revenue source because I don't feel like I'm a good game developer. I don't feel like my approaches to things are things I would recommend other people do. I think my success as a game developer is going to be driven on my approach and my mindset of game development, and I can just create that through Twitch and YouTube. And I don't think, I theoretically could bundle it up of here's an hour-long video of how do you mentally approach game development, and that could be helpful. But it's much less like here's how you use a piece of software, because I feel like I'm always constantly learning more and more and more. And I guess it's maybe the imposter in me that's like, I don't want to give somebody something to, make them pay $20 for this course and then have them, in my head, I'd be like duping them into buying a course. Have you thought of, I know we've talked about a little bit about doing tutorials as a like revenue source. Have you done one, talked about one, made one?
That was part of before I quit my job, I had 3 pillars that I wanted to focus on: game development, YouTube, and course creation. And I completely dropped course creation. I think that I think I'm pretty confident in my programming capabilities in Unity because I was doing it professionally for a few years.
Yeah.
And I feel like I could put out valuable resources for learning game development. But I don't, it's hard because it's like I can either create a course or I could spend that time creating another game, and so I'd rather just focus on game development at this point. And also I think it's like, right now people are going to be like, who is this guy and why would I want to learn from him anyway? But if I can, put out some games that are good quality, then maybe I would get a little more clout in the future to pursue that. But that seems like something that's I'm really trying to not overextend myself into too many areas, but
Yeah.
like you said, trying to like maximize my chances of luck while still like trying to get good at just a couple of things. So
It's working on the scope creep of being a full-time indie dev, right? You're
yeah,
trying to not
exactly.
pick too many baskets, because I agree, if I in the future I have a game that sells relatively well and can be this, oh, it's funded me for 2 more years now or 3 more years, I'm going to take a break as I'm thinking of my next game and talk about that process and talk and share about my approach to making it. um, then I would feel more confident. Chess Survivors has sold 5,000 copies, which is incredibly awesome. Blows
That's
me out of the water, right? But like, I wouldn't call that a hit game by any means, and I would feel weird sharing too much about, like, trying to stamp on there the clickbaity, like, here's how you can make a hit game, when
yeah.
I think objectively Chess Survivors would not fall in the categories of a hit game.
Hmm.
But I
Yeah.
would
I
agree,
think
in
it's
the
interesting.
future it could be a choice.
Yeah, definitely. And like you're pretty humble and self-deprecating with your game development skills. But I'll say when I was talking to my wife a few days ago, I constantly have to re-remind her of like friends that I have online in the game development community, like, oh, Aramis, so and so, or like this person, and like I have like, but I was telling her like, it's really interesting. Different friends that I've made in the online game dev niche seem to have different strong points. And when I think about your strong points, I think specifically when it comes to game development, I think of your ability to design a game well and think through like the design of a game. And I'm like, if I was like a millionaire and I was starting up a studio and I had to hire Aramis, I would probably put him in a design role. Like I think your implementation skills are good, but to be fair, when I watch you code in Godot, I don't really know how Godot works, so I don't really know how you're architecting your code much. I'm like, okay. But I feel like you have a really good grasp on uh, different triggers that you can pull when it comes to what makes a game fun and deep and kind of weighing uh, the different psychologies of players. So yeah, take that for what it's worth.
I appreciate that. I would agree as well. That's something I find interesting, and it's a switch I have a hard time turning off in any game I'm playing, right? Like, I constantly check in, and that's what they said in the book of lenses that you're reading right now. It's like, take
Yeah,
a moment, and if you feel an emotion, think about how they made that emotion. Like, why are you laughing right now? Why are you smile? Like,
yeah,
how the hell did they do that, right? Like, I don't like horror things, but it's like, how did they make me jump scare? I
yeah,
know they're doing jump scares, right? But how did they still manage, like, with me knowing it's gonna happen, I still
yeah.
did it, right? Like, that is an interesting thing to try to dissect as you're experiencing anything. And
Hmm.
so that's the overthinking part of my brain, constantly checking in, being like, oh, this game did this thing that's fun. Like, how did Backpack Battles make me feel? Like, this Tetris game feels so fun and interesting, unique, and like every other, like, especially indie games, I'm very interested in, like, how did indie games implement something um, that feels good or feels unique or feels fun or feels challenging or
Yeah,
feels deep. Like, those are interesting thoughts for me.
yeah, definitely. So how are you managing your scope for this next game? Because I know before you quit your job, you had this other side project, Fibonacci's Final Sequence, that you intentionally chose the design of this game because it had the ability to be a good side project that you could
Yeah.
work on
Oh.
part-time.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've shelved that and you're transitioning to this new game that sounds really cool. And it sounds like from what you've said before, you are looking for it to be a pretty big project potentially. So like yeah, so I'm interested, the name of the podcast is called Scope Creepers, so I'm
Yeah.
interested, how are you what is your mindset for this project, and why shift to this new game now that you're full time?
The main reason I shifted to this new game is because I didn't want to play Fibonacci's Final Sequence. That's it.
That's a good
I'm
reason.
like, I
Yeah.
don't want to play this game. And because of that, I'm like, the reason I picked that game and making a Zachtronics game is because I thought it would be a really, really good hobby project that I could realistically have seen myself launching this summer as a full, early access or something like that sometime this year while still having a full-time job. And now that I'm full-time indie game development, it's just not something I wanted to dedicate my time to, because I've had this idea for this game since last summer, and I've had ideas for games like this in the past. This is going to be kind of a very simplified version of kind of some other bigger ideas I've had. And so managing the scope of this is really challenging because I'm taking some inspiration from ARPGs, which are notoriously deep and they have a lot going on in them. And so it's trying to find ways of how do I simplify the idea down to an essence of an idea. It's that, what is the fun in the game, and basically just tearing out everything else that isn't necessarily fun. I really, really want to focus in on designing systems that all complement each other, that it's not this system needs to be supported by these other 5 systems. It's more just like all of these these kind of 5 big chunks I put together in my head should all kind of help each other out. And if they aren't supporting the main feeling I'm trying to have in the game, or the main reason I'm having like the system in the game, maybe it's time to remove that system or do something else. Like, just really trying to think about that a lot and boil that down as it's like in Nintendo 64 Mario 64, I think it's called. It should be fun to hop around and be Mario.
Yeah.
It is fun. You can just literally open it up and not hop into any painting, and you can jump around and be Mario, and there's some joy there of just moving around and being Mario. I think it's that concept, but with maybe a few layers deeper of what does the game loop look like, and do all the different pieces in the loop support each other in a kind of an infinity loop type of situation is what my brain is picturing. So the other part of scope creep, and I've talked a little bit about this on the stream, is just trying to have it have a ... at the end, where I have dreams and ideas for ways that I could keep expanding it. This is something I really liked about Chess Survivors, is Chess Survivors had a few different areas that I could just build content into. I could build more characters, I could build more abilities, I could build more map types, I could build more map hazards, I could build more relics. That is a way to just add more depth and content into a game. And I liked that a lot, as far as early access was having 20% of what is in there now. And then it was during early access just building out more stuff and kind of reworking and refining each of those systems so they felt better.
Yep.
I like that. I like that a lot.
I think that's, yeah. I think I'm really excited about this game. I think it'll be really cool. Are you planning on setting a development timeline or an MVP for this game, or is it a feature? Like how how are you scoping it, I guess? Are you giving yourself an end date for an MVP, or are you saying these are the X amount of core features that I need, or something else?
It would be much more like these are the core features I need, would be really what determines when it's ready. I would like to have my demo be part of the Next Fest in October. And part of that is getting, what does the demo look like? How do I, my goal for the demo is I really want to have you have a taste of it and be like, oh yeah, I could see this being really fun to play for 10, 20 hours, like just enough of a taste to figure that out. And it's useful because that's all the core systems would be in place for that. Going into the mines, mining, having a little bit of combat, coming back to your base, improving your weapons, hopping back into the mine to collect more resources. Oh, coming out, having a vendor contract that you have to add cold damage to a weapon. Let me go figure out how to build cold damage, or I have to cycle through 5 wands till I finally get a wand that will randomly have cold damage on it. But oh wait, now I've upgraded my crafting bench so I can specifically say have a higher chance of having cold damage or something like that. So getting feature complete would be what I want for the demo, and then ideally having early access come months after, ideally a month or two after after the Next Fest, so kind of a December early access launch. But that could all get pushed back as well. It could be the February Next Fest instead. But using Next Fest as my milestone of the timeline and helping me make the decision of is this worth the time I'm putting into it for that early access scope. Early access scope is like MVP type situation where you can play a full game, you can have your fun for it, but then there can be still ... and shoving stuff into ... as much as possible. In my head, ... is like the scope between early access and the full launch. And that could be, I think with this game, it could be years. It could also be, hey, March 15th, 2025, the game launches into full build. And we move on to the next game then. Who knows?
Yeah.
How are you managing that? How are you managing the scope? I know you're getting close with Bridges and Docks. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Bridges and Docks is an interesting game because it's more
say
like
it in the right order?
Townscape.
Bridges and
Bridges
and Docks.
It's been so apparent to me that I mistitled this game since I gave it this name because everybody gets it wrong. They call it docks and bridges and islands, like all this different stuff. And I'm like, well, it's not very memorable, but that's all right. It's less of a game and more of a building experience. I call it a chill island building game, and you use a combination of manual tools that you can by hand sculpt the island and place different buildings and plants and animals and all of this stuff. And then there's also a procedural element to it where you can just move some different sliders and mess with the values, hit the generate button, and it'll generate these really cool landscapes for you. It's super interesting because it's not the game that I wanted to make. The game that I want to make is a minimalist war strategy game.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted it to take place on islands. And so my idea is that, well, that is too big of a scope for me to commit to, because I want to get more releases out there so that I can try and make a little more income. So my idea was to split it down the middle, and basically Bridges and Docks is a glorified level editor for the game that I want to make. And it's actually really fun. I lose time just messing with it. It's nearing its completion. It's pretty polished. So that's how I've been managing my scope, is that basically I cut my game into 2 games.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm trying to do it. Originally, I wanted it to launch in January, and basically my scope has been creeped because of a few different variables, but I think the biggest one is having the new baby and trying to. It's been taking a lot of my time for taking care of the little one and also getting very little sleep in the night, and so that. Also, I've been getting more traction on YouTube, so I've been shifting a little bit more of my work time towards YouTube. But that's basically it. I'm basically done with the game. It's very, very close.
That's exciting.
I just spent some time putting together a draft for a new trailer, updated the Steam page with new screenshots. I'm pretty excited for where it's going. The biggest complaint that people had was that there's no objective or gamification of it. So I actually spent some time putting in objectives and rewards, so you progressively unlock the tools and different items that you can use to build out your islands. So it's pretty basic, but yeah, my strategy overall is to release many different small scoped games and try and make a meager income that is recurring and rely on the long tail of previous releases instead of spending all of my time putting all my eggs in one game basket. So that's kind of my strategy. We'll see if it works.
I feel like that's a better strategy. I'm going to throw all my eggs into a basket because it's the basket I like. I can't help myself. It's this
Yeah.
idea has been something in the back of my head that I'm like, I want to make this idea and I want to do it.
Yeah.
And I, like that's I think the narrative of the last couple months of my life and leading up to this decision is like, let me be honest with myself about my feelings. Like I want to be externally validated by making a hit game, and that's just in my heart. I want, like, I know it's really hard, and I kind of like that it's so hard. I'm drawn to game development because it's a really hard thing. It's hard to get a game
Yeah.
released. It's hard. It's why YouTube's kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's hard to make a video and you can measure it. Like you get a measurable output. Like in our jobs, it's really hard to know if you have a high wins above replacement. If compared to the other average developer, are you, 2 points better, 3 points better? Are you a negative? Are you a negative versus the average? But it's like finding things that you can measure yourself against is kind of fun. It's also incredibly dangerous, and I know it sets myself up for failure and for sadness and for like releasing a game and having it not be good. But it's also like I kind of want to prove I can do it, and that's a lot of the honesty of why I want to make a game, is because I want to prove I can do something that's like has big mass appeal, and not mass appeal, but like, and it's hard. Like, then how do you define that? How do I know if I've reached it? Because I know I'm going to get there someday and it's going to feel hollow and empty, and that's okay, I guess. But like, I don't know, Thomas.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really, really interesting point. Motivation. Like what is your motivation for making video games? And I think it's commendable that you are pursuing that question with authenticity and being genuine about it. I was talking to somebody recently about the YouTube sphere of game development and how there are a lot of people out there, primarily those who make online courses to learn that you can buy from them, and they are pitching this idea of quitting your full-time job to make video games in order to become a millionaire.
Yeah.
And that seems borderline predatory to me because it's so hard. It's so hard, and the stats are not in your favor. It's the amount of people that buy those courses versus the people who make $1 million selling a video game or video games is going to be probably zero. But I think that there's a deeper question there, and I've been thinking about this a lot, where what is motivating people? And this is actually a question that I had a lot with my wife when I was contemplating quitting my job. She was very supportive of me. She wanted me to like pursue my dream and find a career path that was more fulfilling to me. But her one hesitation was that she didn't want me to quit my job because I was dissatisfied with my job. She wanted me to have a positive reason for quitting instead of a negative reason for quitting. And I thought that was really interesting because I didn't like that, and I had to sit with it for a while because there were many reasons that I was dissatisfied, but I also thought, I think I like the idea of making big life decisions in pursuit of something positive or worthwhile instead of trying to escape the things that are difficult or you don't like.
Yeah.
And I think that is a big part of like the indie game dream, that people are wanting to like quit their job because their job consists of getting up early and going to a job where they're unfulfilled, and so I don't know. There's so much to unpack there, but that's just been like a lot of stuff that's been on my mind. But like trying to figure out what motivates me, and I think for me, the means are the end for me. Like I enjoy making video games, and if I am able to continue doing that, then that is because I enjoy the process. And I don't have like an outcome that I'm trying to attain. Yeah. yeah, but there's a lot there, and I'm just starting to kind of like piece it together. So I don't know what your
Hmm.
thoughts on all that are.
I think for me, maybe making a hit in game is the wrong way of doing it. I think for me, what I really want to prove to myself, and what I said is my thesis for doing all like starting this journey again, is I want to have the decision for when and if I get a job again to be a decision I make, not a result of running out of money.
Yeah.
It could be in 2 years, it could be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but I want it to be okay. I've done this. I'm ready to be done. And I think in the shortest term, I think it would be really cool to be 3 years down the road and be like, oh shit, I remember making that YouTube video talking about, the anxiety of not being able to do it. And holy cow, I've been doing it for 3 years. Like,
Hmm.
to prove to myself that I can do it, to prove to like nobody in my friends or family are going to be like, God, you're an idiot. You're so dumb. In my
Hmm.
head, people are like, God, what an idiot.
Yeah.
He quit his job and
Yeah.
like he's risking his house, he's risking his, livelihood to make a video game. And like people are like, "Oh, what's your video game?" I'm like, "You don't play video games. I can't explain it to you." Like,
Yeah.
which doesn't make it, I can't be like, "Oh, it's this pixel art thing. Here's a picture of them." Like, okay. Like, so
Yeah.
there's part of me that wants to like just be able to say like, yeah, I've been doing this for 3 years now. Um, there's a lot of fear in me. Like I've told a lot of people in my life that I quit my job again, but I haven't told my dad yet. I haven't told some of my friends yet. I haven't told my partner's family yet. And like that all gives me anxiety because I'm like, I don't want to look stupid to them. One of my like
Yeah.
core principles in life is like trying to seem competent to others. And like in
Hmm.
my head, it's the story I'm telling myself of like, oh, my partner's family, she's like, well, they're not going to be taking, you're not taking care of our daughter anymore. You're not like fulfilling her life anymore. You're not giving her stability and safety. Like you're failing. And I don't
Hmm.
like that sensation. So I guess part of
Yep.
me also wants to prove that I can go out there and I can make a game that makes me money, that makes me have this, that is fun for players. And as a result of it's fun for players, gives me like a stable life. Because in my career, I felt like I can give a C plus effort and get accolades like I'm an A plus, and just money is easier to make when I'm working for somebody else. And I
Yeah.
don't like that I can feel like I'm phoning it in. So I want to like
Hmm.
prove to myself that if I put in 110% effort into game development, that I can like make a life around it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep. And it's easier to tell yourself that you could do it while you're working a day job and be like, man, if I just had 40 hours a week that I was putting into this, I could definitely do this and like make it work, you know? And
Yeah.
you have to be real honest with yourself when you're actually doing it and you're like, I don't know if this is going to work out. A bit scarier.
It is a lot scarier, and it is very realistic that you're like, yeah, you never know. It's so out of our control. There's so much out of your control that it is
Yeah.
then trying to focus on what is in my control. What can I do well? How do we create those opportunities for luck to occur? And when they do occur, how do we emphasize? How do you jump on top of that and like double down? That I
Yeah.
think is something I'll be considering more and more as time goes on, as more content gets put out there, as I do more Twitch streams, as we do more of these podcasts. How can we create opportunities for
Yeah.
luck to happen to our games and our content and everything.
Yeah, definitely. Like I've been surprised at as I invest in like Twitter and YouTube and trying to make content online and kind of build in public, uh, there hasn't been a huge influence on my bottom line as far as like game sales.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I found that the networking benefit is almost almost you can't even put like a dollar sign on it. Like I've had people reach out to me. I've made connections with numerous developers. I've um, got accepted into the Unity Insider program, and so like I have like
Mm-hmm.
the inside scoop on the engine and upcoming features and stuff. I've had publishers reach out to me about like potentially funding upcoming games, and like it's very interesting trying to balance like the sprinkling the opportunities of luck, and like meeting the right people versus, sitting at your keyboard and typing all day and trying to actually build a game.
Yeah. I think that's something, hearing you talk about that in the past 6 months, like all the people you've met, is definitely something I hope to do as well. And I think Twitch is useful because people can literally come into stream, or I can raid people and like meet people that way.
Yeah.
But that's also
Yeah.
just other Twitch streamers, which might not be, that's like a very focused audience that I'd be getting to know more of. So yeah, finding community is definitely something that's helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. That is about an hour's worth of chatting and general vibing, which blew by. Holy cow.
Yeah, that flew by.
I want to open it up to chat. Sorry, we've been ignoring you for a bit. Thanks for hanging out and listening to us chat. The last little portion here, we'll open up to a Q&A. If you have any questions for us specifically, maybe focus around the decision-making process of quitting our jobs and becoming full-time indies. If you have any thoughts or questions about that, now would be the time to have your voice be heard. If not, Thomas and I could talk for hours about random stuff, but
Yep.
we can leave it open if there's anything else that people have thoughts or questions about.
Okay, here's a question for you as we wait. Is it
Yeah.
difficult for you to interact with viewers on your stream and then know that there's a lag between like when they're hearing you and then they have to type something and then respond? Like I feel like you're really good at filling those silences with your own thoughts and like making it not awkward, but I feel like if I was streaming, I would be like, "Hey guys, how's it going?" And then I would just sit there for like 45 seconds and then wait for them to respond. Do you even think about that anymore, or does it just come naturally to you?
It comes a bit more naturally. I'm a little surprised by how much experience from 2022 when I streamed regularly has stuck with me, of just how do you be on stream, and like it helped me hit the ground running and have a few pretty successful days of streaming in a row. It's something I'm always thinking about, I guess, is like, how do I balance between lulls in the stream, which are completely normal, where I'm going to be doing game development and people are just going to be hanging out, enjoying the vibe of me doing game development, versus moments where I'm craving to chat a little bit. And if I'm feeling energy in chat where people are communicating and asking questions and saying things and memeing and all those different moments, like, when do I lean into those? When do I find a soapbox to go stand on and give a speech? That is a balancing act I definitely want to figure out. And something particularly interesting to think about is not whose comments, but which comments do I decide to read out loud and respond to, and which ones do I not. For any of them being bad or wrong, but just for the narrative of the stream I'm trying to have. I think when I first started streaming a lot, I would get off tangents on things that I didn't need to, for no reason, just other than someone was asking a question and I wanted to give them time to feel like I could hear them and work through their question or something like that. So figuring that out a little bit more, of not necessarily grabbing every piece of chat that comes through and holding on to that, but more just trying to be thoughtful as far as everybody's watching. I may be trying to give one person some like, oh yeah, you asked me this question, let me dive into it. But there's a group of people watching, and being cognizant of that and making sure that I'm giving time to content that I want to be making.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of that, we have a question. You're talking about the expectations of supporting your family and things. How do you convince yourself and your partner you're contributing instead of just doing video game things all day? That's a good question. Do you want to field this one first?
Sure. It's very easy for me to convince my wife that I'm being productive because she knows uh, how badly I want this to work out, and she actually asks. We've had a few conversations about like she wants me to have a time that I clock out in the evenings, and she wants me to do things that aren't at my desk on the weekends because I have a very strong work ethic when it comes to game development, and I'm working longer than when I had a day job. And so she's actually actively trying to fight against me. And so she has no question in her mind when she walks into my office and I'm have an Xbox controller in my hand. She's like, "Oh, he's testing something. He's not playing games, you know?"
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's very easy for my spouse, but there's other people that don't really get it, like family members will sometimes be like, "So, like, how's your job going?" You know, and they're like, they don't really know exactly what questions to ask,
Yep.
and you know, they'll walk into my office and they'll see I have, you can't see it, but I have 5 consoles right here, and they're all developer kits. So I don't play games on them. I only test on them. But you know, people come in here and they're like, "Oh, nice, you've got your gaming corner," and I'm like, "Sort of." Yeah.
I think for me, it comes down to the type of relationship that it sounds like both of us have built a little bit, where I can talk with my partner about anything. We have a lot of trust in each other, and she, especially thinking about when I did this in 2022, like I had set aside a bunch of money so she was not financially burdened by my decision making, and I wanted to make sure that she understood where I was every step of the way, and that still continues. I share every part of this journey with her, and that trust and that respect, I think, goes a long way to making me feel like I can do this decision, and there's not going to be any sort of like ill will between us or like resentment toward me not doing what I need to do, and like her allowing me to fail if I fail, right? She's absolutely okay with that as a prospect because I've given her enough trust in me that I will handle needing to go become a janitor or needing to go work as a barista or getting another job as a Salesforce engineer. Like, I think she understands that I have edges to this adventure and I'm not going to risk losing our house or anything like that. So that's how I've
Yeah, I think
managed kind of that navigating of that difficult topic.
that communication is awesome, and it's been super helpful for me too. Like since my wife had the baby 4 months ago, you know, she's gone back to work part time right now, and she's expressed to me like, "Man, I wish I could just do part time permanently," you know, but she doesn't. She wants to work full time, you know, while we're in this precarious financial situation. And but I heard that and I'm like, okay, I'm like looking at job listings. I'm like almost like sending out job applications because I'm like, if my self-employment journey is impeding how my wife wants to spend time with our baby, you know, then it's like, okay, I like that's where my priority is, and I've been very open about that, that if she wants to be home more, then I will make sure that, you know, she has that opportunity.
And I think saying that like out loud and like speaking those feelings out loud to people is really helpful. Not just
Yeah.
like in my head having the intention like, oh, if I need to pull the emergency brake, I'll pull it. But like saying like,
Yeah.
hey, my hand is on the brake right now. Like I'm ready to like yank this if it becomes a thing where like this is unman like having those saying those things out loud to people and like those can be really vulnerable moments that are scary. And
Yep.
a lot of the times like speaking things out loud can make them feel real. But I think it also goes a long way to building that trust together. And like I think in generally speaking, in my experience, relationships will falter the most when resentment starts to grow toward each other,
Yep.
and that can happen from many different ways. And just trying to like not like we can't read each other's minds, and just letting your feelings be out there and known, and that they're all valid. And two counter ideas, like I want to make games and I want to stay home and be with our child the most, can both be good feelings and valid feelings, even though they kind of contradict each other in terms. And that's all valid and that's all helpful. But
Yep.
not talking about it could build resentment toward either person.
Definitely.
Very good question. Very good question. Any other questions from chat as we're wrapping up here? I did want to ask a little bit about telling family members and stuff that you quit your job.
Oh, yeah.
How open have you been with them? And like, as you were considering it, was it something you were leaving breadcrumbs to, or like, you know, once it just happened, you're like, hey guys, I did this thing. Here's my plan. Like, especially with game development and video games, where like a lot of the people I'm going to be telling have no idea what a video game is. Yeah. And like, they're going to picture Call of Duty or some shit. And like, I don't know. How do you approach that?
It wasn't that difficult for me. Once I had a date on the calendar, I started mentioning it casually, like, and it made sense because it wasn't difficult for family members to grasp because of two things. One, I was taking extended leave to go to Europe, and two, my wife was pregnant and she still wanted to work, and so I framed my self-employment in a way that it also is flexible with, you know, taking care of the baby and being around when so that we can be flexible with like childcare and stuff like that. And that makes sense for people who don't get it otherwise.
Yeah. It's almost like a sabbatical than anything to them then.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think it really made that much of a difference in people's minds too, because I was already making video games from home. So they're like, you look like you're doing the exact same thing. It's just like, yeah, except I'm not getting paid. Yeah. So it was actually harder for me to tell family members about my YouTube channel. I was a lot more self-conscious about that. I actually didn't tell anybody. My wife leaked it to all of my family, and I was like, oh man. And so now it's like everybody's like watching my videos, and it's, I don't know. I get more self-conscious about that. So I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Well, I never told my partner's family that I did it the first time. I just lied to them. They were like, how's your job going? I'm like, it's going well, you know, it's a job, whatever. And I just changed the topic immediately, always just deflecting.
That's like,
and so I never told them the first time. They didn't know about it. Like, I told all my friends, I told all my family. It's just like, it was specifically my partner's family, like telling her family just was like, I don't want to look like a fuck up to them. And I'm putting so much pressure on that to like, you know, to be that in actuality, they might understand and be okay with it. And not care.
You think it would give you pushback?
I don't know. That is a lot to unpack in that conversation.
Sure.
But I don't know. I think it's a valid fear that I have to tell them, but it's I fully agree about telling people about your YouTube channel. It feels interesting to like YouTube I want to be genuine and honest on YouTube, and it feels weird to be trying to give more honesty to people on YouTube than I would potentially be giving to people in my life. The same thing about,
my parents told me, they're like, oh, I only know what's going on in your life because I watched your recent devlogs. And I'm like, oof. Yeah, maybe I should call you more.
Yeah. I felt the same way about work, like telling people about work, because there's videos in there where I'm talking about the stresses of having a job and stuff like that. And like, I didn't want to burn bridges there. I wanted to leave on a really good note because I genuinely liked working there. I liked the company I was a part of. You saying leaving a job, not because you resent the job, but because you want to do something, that like was so profound, because I'm doing that. Like, I left a situation that was good to me, and I'm doing something that I want to go do. And I think that hopefully will pay its dividends here. But yeah, like telling people, and I was very honest with them. I told them, hey, I'm quitting my job because I want to go make games. And that felt so stupid. Like
Yeah.
to tell like the chief product owner, who is my like skip level manager, I guess, like tell her that, like, oh man. And like, I'm like, do I look like an idiot? Like, cause all these people respect me a lot because they know I'm professionally good at my job. But it's like, do I look like an idiot now? And then they can go see like, oh, what's your game? What's your name? I was like, oh, I don't have a name yet. I don't have a page yet. It's fine. But like, you have I have this YouTube channel you can go look at, and like, I don't know. I think it's better to share with your friends and family than not. But it doesn't.
I've only had positive feedback from people, and like even like my in-laws they're always like following up. They're like, oh, how'd your Xbox launch go? Oh, like we watched your latest 3 videos. We binge watched them all at once, and they're so good. And we're like, hey, we know that guy. You know, it's like it's all been like real positive in my experience.
I would totally agree, and it's a lot of fears are just fears because you're telling stories that aren't going to be true. Not you specifically, just we all tell stories that are kind of all made up in our own heads.
Totally.
Cool. Well, no other questions in chat, it sounds like, so we can wrap this one up for now. Stop recording.